All right, we're good.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Wisdom and Wanderlust series. My name is Robin, and I'm a trip designer here at Explorex. And as you can see, I'm not Michael. I'm taking over as host today. We are switching things up, and Michael will be our guest this time. So I am here to say, on behalf of the entire Explorex team around the world, we are honored and excited to have you guys join us for our virtual meet and greet with the co-founder of our company, Michael Bennett. So Michael has dedicated his life to helping others find the path on their own hero's journey. This is a concept from Joseph Campbell that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And that so inspired Michael that he ultimately co-founded the company along with Jake Halpert to use travel as a tool to help people discover their own hero's journey. So Michael has been so focused on helping others on this journey for so long that we wanted to turn the lens back on him today and learn more about his own hero's journey. So before we begin, I want to give you a little bit of background on the Explorex community. We are a Seattle, Washington-based travel company, though we all work remotely. And while most are in the Seattle area, there are some outliers like myself. I'm in Bozeman, Montana. We create custom travel experiences as well as carefully crafted, scheduled small group journeys. We pride ourselves on being able to provide our travelers with access to really unique people and places that we have connections with around the world. But we do so mindfully, not only crafting these incredible, what we call outer journey experiences, but also with a focus on what we call the inner journey in hopes of using these experiences to inspire, guide, and support the shift of our travelers' perspectives, cultural awareness, understanding, as well as unleashing creativity and courage. So our ultimate goal is using travel as a tool for helping others become the best version of themselves and for their community. So I'll stop there. You can learn more about us on the website, explorer-x.com, or by contacting us at travel@explorer-x.com. But for now, welcome. Before we begin our chat with Michael today, I'm going to pass it over to Amanda, and she's going to introduce herself and go over a few housekeeping notes.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. I manage our small group journeys and assist Robin with travel design of our custom journeys. I've been in the travel industry for about 15 years, specializing in nature and wildlife adventures for a good portion of that time, but also selling a bit of everything along the way. I grew up in Michigan, and I've lived and worked in both Scotland and New Zealand, and also spent a good bit of time in Boulder, Colorado, but I am now based in Seattle, which is very sunny today, sorry. Although my background is beautiful Norway. So I've been working on a Norway trip for our small group journeys. So I felt inspired to have that be my background for this evening. Before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. We are going to keep this as close to an hour as possible, although I know Michael has a lot of great stories to share, so I can't promise we won't go a bit long, but we will try to keep things on track. We are recording this, and it will be available afterwards, so if you do need to duck out a little early, we'll be emailing everyone a link. And finally, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to answer questions throughout the conversation or at the end if that works.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Amanda. So, hey, Michael, I'm excited to be the one interviewing you today.
Hi, Robin.
Can you start by saying hi to our audience and telling us a bit about who you are and where you're from?
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Amanda. I'm Michael Bennett, co-founder of Explorex, also co-founder of the Transformational Travel Council, which we'll probably talk a little bit about today. Originally from Philadelphia. After undergrad, moved to California, lived there for about 13 years, and moved up here to Seattle about 3 years ago. Love it. Live in Columbia City here in Seattle, and me and Fred hang out. We have a good time.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about like your career trajectory and what led you to the point of co-founding the company with Jake?
Yes, and I will try to do this in 30 minutes or less. I no, I always start by saying that, my earliest memories, growing up were sitting around the kitchen table with my mom, looking at National Geographic magazines and sort of gawking at these images of, the women in Africa with the really long necks and like being like, that's so weird and that's so strange, and being so intrigued by them and looking at different images of people from all over the world and different cultures. And it just, the idea of travel sort of captivated me from the get-go, from when I was very, very young. Now, I didn't travel all that much as a kid. We traveled a lot domestically, didn't travel outside of the country until I was in college. But was always super intrigued by cultures, people, philosophies, stories, etc. When all my friends were, playing, whatever they were playing, Nintendo or whatever was going on back then, I was playing, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, and learning all the capitals. And these are all things that help me, with our travel planning now, which is kind of fun. But yeah, so I went to the University of Delaware in undergrad, or for undergrad, and I came in undecided, undeclared as a major. I knew I really wanted to study psychology or anthropology or some combination of the two. But my grandparents, who were paying for a good chunk of my college education, were like, got to be practical. It's got to be science, math, business, engineering, like something like that. And so I delayed the inevitable as long as I could and just sort of was undecided for 2 years. But what was kind of fun about that was that as an undecided student, they asked you to take this career interest inventory as you're getting, as you're starting your college career. And I remember there were 200 and some odd possible, outcomes or career paths that they could have recommended for you. And the three that were the very, very top of the list were adventure activities, international relations and cultures, and adult learning and education. And so when you think about what we're doing here with Explorex, right? I mean, that's exactly it. It's traveling, it's cultures, it's learning and growth and all of those things. So that test even then sort of nailed me. It just took me the better part of 20 years to figure it out and to listen to that. So anyway, long story. I spent some time in Costa Rica while in undergrad, which was certainly one of my more transformative and life-changing moments and experiences. And
I feel like you need to tell us a little bit more about that.
So I went, there's a lot of funny stories here. I went as a junior. Delaware is unique because it's got the fall and the spring semester, but then the winter, they have like a winter break that's typically about 7 weeks long. It goes from like January through most of February. And so, this was my first time abroad, so I didn't really want to travel for a semester. It was a little bit intimidating. So I chose to go over that winter break. And so I went down there for about 7 weeks with a group of about 40 other students from the university. And, we stayed with the family. It was a homestay. It was great. I'll never forget the cold showers, the massive spiders, and the dog that had 3 legs that that was living in the home with us. I mean, it was just, it was great. But I think the moment there that really stands out was I was out for a run one evening with my roommate and just trying to get some exercise. We're college kids. We're drinking lots of beer and eating cheap food and, trying to stay in shape. And I ended up getting hit by a car. And, luckily I survived. It could have been a lot worse. I don't know why I always remember this, but I remember laying on the ground. My eyes were open. I couldn't see. I had a concussion, pretty badly, but I couldn't see, but I knew my eyes were open. And my roommate comes over and he's like, "Holy shit, I think he's dead." And literally I can still hear his words, like saying that. And so,
Wow.
Anyway, luckily it was all right. I also remember the driver yelling at me because his windshield was broken by my head. And he was saying that I had to pay for his windshield.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever. So I was laid up for a couple of weeks. I mean, again, nothing major, a few small, broken hand and concussion and, things that were not dramatic. But it really set me off on a new course, right? That moment was like, wow, like I could have died. Maybe I should have died. I mean, I got lucky. I sort of saw him out of the corner of my eye, jumped up at the last minute, so I landed on his hood and didn't get knocked under the car, which obviously would have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
And so like in that period of time, it just gave me a chance to reflect and to think about like, what am I doing? Here I am, I'm 20 years old. I'm in college. I'm not really pursuing an education that I want. Life is short. Like, what do I do with this? And so that was really the moment that started me thinking about, I need to start living on purpose. I need to start doing things that excite me, that energize me, that really kind of get me going. And that was, and even then I started thinking about like, I just got hit by a car, but like, this is freaking awesome. Like this whole experience of being in another culture and learning, and the amount of growth that was going on in my brain, in my heart, my soul was immense. And I knew right then, when you think about education and travel and all those things, that I really wanted to find a way to share those types of experiences with other people at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So naturally, when I graduated, I got a job doing marketing for a semiconductor manufacturing company. I mean, that's sort of the natural foray into the
Naturally.
travel space. But I shared this story with you guys yesterday. I lasted about 6 months at that job, and rightfully got fired. I should have been fired. The funny part was I got fired because I was using it's a semiconductor manufacturing, so they're printing out these massive blueprints for designs of labs around the world, and I was using the printers to print out maps of Europe, because this guy that I work with, right, was getting his master's. He was there on a co-op, and he wanted to go to Europe, and so he and I would stick around after hours and grab some beers, and like I'd print out these massive 8x12 maps of Europe, and we'd be charting out where you should be going and all that stuff. And apparently that cost a lot of money, and they figured out what I was doing, and I wasn't working, so they ended up firing me for planning his trip to Europe, which I ended up going on.
So was that the trip to Switzerland? Or did you use one of those maps for that trip?
No, so Switzerland came years later. I mean, we did go to Switzerland on that trip. And again, like, keep me reined in here because I can talk stories for a while. But I do remember that actually there was a pretty pivotal moment in Switzerland on that trip, because I was with 4 other guys. And I remember we had traveled, we had flown into Spain and traveled around southern France, and I managed to drive my moped into a Jaguar and cause about $5,000 worth of damage.
Oh, wow.
Another story. But we ended up in Switzerland, and what happened was, like, this was like about 2 weeks again into the trip. And these guys were they're good guys, right? And they're just out of college, and they're like partying, and they're like, let's stay out until 3 a.m. Let's get really drunk. Let's get up at 2 p.m. and go to happy hour immediately, And I was like, this is not what I want to do. Like, I've never been to Europe before. Like, I want to explore this. And so I split off from them for the better part of 2 weeks and kind of went and did my own thing. And it started when we were in Switzerland. And that was a really powerful experience for me too, because this is my first time like traveling by myself in a way, right, while I'm outside the country. And so anyway, just really inspired me, gave me the courage, gave me the sense of like, yeah, I can do this on my own if I really want to get out there and start exploring. And it was a really uplifting time.
Yeah. So you helped plan your buddy's trip to Europe before you had even been there yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've read tons of books and magazines, and Carmen Sandiego and Nat Geo, so I felt like I'd been there in my own head. But yeah, that was the first time I had actually been there. So and it was wonderful. It was awesome. It was everything I had hoped it would be, and I ended up going back not long after that with my brother and one of my best friends, and we spent another month, a year later, touring around and experiencing that. But yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, Europe is it's like an easy place to get around, and it's a great like first sort of international travel experience.
Totally.
Besides Costa Rica, I guess. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about your research and your doctorate and kind of how you got into that program? Yeah,
totally. So anyway, let me just quickly fill in some blanks here. So got back from Europe, got a job working at a university in Philadelphia, which is again where I grew up. And loved that experience. I was working in higher education. I was doing recruiting. I had a chance to travel around the country a lot. There was no international travel there, but what was really the most rewarding part of that was getting a chance to work with these students. There was an optometry school in Philadelphia, so I was trying to get them into our optometry program, recruit them to come into our optometry program. Excuse me, and you know what? It was one of the most rewarding work experiences I've ever had, because here I am going out and talking to these kids who, you know, they want to become optometrists. I said, well, why? Like, what is it about optometry? And they're like, well, my mom and dad, you know, are optometrists, and I just feel like this is what I should do. And the number of conversations that we had that were about following their passions, right? Following their bliss. Like, what is it that you want to do? Forget about what your mom and dad want you to do. Like, what is it that lights you on fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and number one, and number two, like, even people that were like, well, I'm really interested in optometry, but I really want to do research. And I'm like, well, we're more practical and hands-on. So if you want research, you should check out these other schools, not our school. You know, and so I'd get sort of this career counselor and coach role, right? Which I really grew to love. And it ended up being this, I ended up getting as many thank you cards from people that were like, hey, I ended up not going to optometry school, and I'm now in this other career, and it's all because of you, right?
Nice.
Or I went to this school and I'm loving it, and thanks for the inspiration that I did for people that came to our own school and were like, hey, this is great, you know? So anyway, in doing that, I got myself recruited to go to grad school out in California. I met a lot of folks while I was traveling and doing the recruiting circuit. I'd been wanting to move to California for a while, moved out there, went to grad school, got my MBA, studied in Copenhagen for a semester, and then started working after that in organizational learning and development. You know, and a lot of it was sort of personal growth, you know, professional development, coaching, that kind of stuff. So really tied back to what I was doing at the higher education. And about a year into that, my mentor and boss was like, listen, like, you're really good at this stuff. If you really like this, you know, you really need to start thinking about getting a doctorate, because if you want to pursue this as a career path, you're going to need to get an advanced degree, another advanced degree in this field. And so I enrolled in a doctorate program in education. The focus was on organizational leadership, so mostly for people that were working in schools, universities, that kind of stuff, and in leadership and management roles. And so I enrolled in that program, and it was then that I sort of about a year or so into that program came across this idea of experiential learning. And the idea that adults learn very differently than children, right? And children, so much of it is additive, right? You're learning new facts and new things every day. But as adults, while we continue to do that, right, the amount of the degree of that sort of diminishes, and it's more about shifting perspectives and relearning things, right? Or beginning to see ourselves or others through new perspectives, right? And that often is triggered by certain experiences that we have, right? So how do we provide more experiences? So when you relate that back to the work that I was doing in organizational learning and development, right? These are adults that are 30, 40, 50 years old, right? They're pretty set in their ways. So how do you give them experiences that, you know, invite them to step back and say, maybe I can reimagine this, right? Or maybe I can reimagine myself or my work or whatever it might be. But that then triggered this idea that, well, geez, like when it came time to figure out what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do my dissertation on, I kept coming back to the idea that experiential learning, number one, and number two, the most powerful experiences of my life, right, that had always shifted my perspectives, were travel related experiences. And so, you know, I sat down with my advisor and said, look, like, I'd like to explore how travel can be a catalyst for experiential learning, growth, and change in our lives. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you went on to found Muddy Shoe Adventures next, right? Or did you cross paths with Jake first?
Not yet. No, I hadn't crossed paths with Jake.
Okay.
So I finished the research, and, you know, a series of, you know, sort of spontaneous and fortuitous events led me, you know, like one of them was I met this guy, Don Mankin, who has become a mentor and a very, very close friend. And Don, I think he just turned 70, 78, 79. But we lived together, and Don's, all right, Don, quick plug, Don's going to be joining us next week for our Wisdom and Wanderlust conversation. So But, you know, Don lived about a mile away from me I was in Santa Monica. Don lived in Venice Beach. But Don was the dean of the California School of Professional Psychology, which is where my mentor went to school for his doctorate. And so when I told Gary, my mentor, like, hey, this is what I want to study. He's like, you need to talk to Don. Because Don at that point had retired from his academic career and had started travel writing and was writing about what we would now call transformational travel. Yeah. So anyway, Don and I connected, and we had a beer, you know, as we always do, and met at a bar, had a beer, had a burger, and then he's like, hey, I've got your dissertation set. And you know, typically this takes like years to collect your data set. And he's like, I got it back in my house. I was writing this book for Nat Geo. This was in 2009. So there was the recession. They're like, no one's traveling. No one cares about this stuff now. But he'd already done all the research. He'd done like 39 interviews for people that had self-described life-changing experiences. And so I used that as my data set. So the outcome of that, you know, in a nutshell, was just that people followed, and to kind of bring in the hero's journey idea, right? People followed this sort of predictable arc or pattern when they went through, you know, again, a life-changing travel experience. And I had read about Joseph Campbell's work in the hero's journey, you know, when I was doing my literature review for the doctorate, and was just super inspired. When I thought back about my travel experiences and then what the hero's journey was about, I mean, you could just like map it out, like step by step by step, like what was going on and then what was happening. And so, anyway, I through the research sort of realized that all these people that had gone on these life-changing trips had very much followed that same pattern. And so when I launched Muddy Shoe after I graduated, it was with the intention of building a company and building programs around this model, right? Which had not really been applied to which had never really been applied to travel before this. And trying to say, great, here's this model of the hero's journey. And I want to invite all of you on your own hero's journey by going on these trips with us.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So that's where your obsession with Joseph Campbell came from, is back at that point. So then did you incorporate that into Muddy Shoe, or is it just when you founded Explorex?
Yeah, no, I definitely try to incorporate a lot of those elements into Muddy Shoe, you know, like, you know, just for those that may not be super familiar with Campbell's work, we can actually, if you want, Robin, when we send out the email, we can send them. We've got a lot of documents sort of summarizing what it's about.
Yeah.
But the part that really struck me, I mean, you know, you can look at Campbell's work, and there's 14 or 22 or however many steps of the hero's journey, depending on who you ask and what's included and what's not. But the three major levels that everyone sort of understands and agrees upon are, the first one is the separation or the departure. So the hero is in his or her ordinary world, you know, things are moving along as per usual, and then something happens that inspires them to want to go travel or forces them, you know. So it could be, you know, you look at like the Wizard of Oz, and you've got Dorothy and the tornado, right? And off she goes, right? But a lot of times it's people like that are just feeling a sense of discontentment or unhappiness or longing for something different, right? The experience of life that they're having is not the experience of life that they want to be having. They can't quite figure out how to make that happen. And so they just decide that I need to get out, and that's their call. And then so that step one is sort of like the separation or the departure includes this idea of the call to adventure, where, you know, relevant to the work that we're doing, often involves, one, the hero refusing his or her call, right? And then two, meeting a mentor who's like, no, you got this, and this is why you need to do this, and this is why it's important not only for you, but for others as well. And so in some ways, and being as humble as we can, I feel like a lot of the role that we play at Explorex is part of that mentor, right? It's talking about like, not only should you go, but here's why it's important for your life, and here's how it's going to have an impact not only on you, but on others as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of part one. And I've done like 3-hour lectures on this stuff, so like I'm going to try to like keep it short. Okay. Part two is actually the journey, right, or what Campbell calls the road of trials. And so that's where we enter, we cross the threshold of adventure. We go into this zone unknown, this extraordinary world. You know, we're faced with trials and challenges and shapeshifters and enemies, but then we also meet allies and new friends and people that support us. And as we go through these trials and challenges, we learn, right? We develop new skills, we develop new knowledge, new relationships, and all of this stuff helps us learn and grow. You know, and then eventually within this extraordinary world, we are faced with this sort of final battle. You know, this culminating battle where we face our dragons, as Campbell would call it.
Yeah.
And so 90+% of the time it's mental, right? It's just about like, you know, what's going on? How do I find clarity? How do I find resolution? How do I find the answers that I'm looking for, right? How do I bring more peace and aliveness and all of this stuff to my life, right? Love and freedom. How do I bring all of that to my life? You know, so we go through all these mental hurdles, and if we can sort of overcome that, right, with the support of all the people that we've met along the way, you know, we're able to gain what Campbell would call the gift or the boon, right? The elixir. And that's sort of this wisdom or this knowledge or whatever it might be that we can then bring home with us, right? So we cross back over the threshold of adventure into the known world again, right? This is the third part, the return, where we begin to integrate whatever we learned into our lives. And hopefully that then not only creates growth and learning and just all the things that we've been looking for in our own lives, but has a powerful and positive impact on the lives of those around us. So anyway, so that's where I got sort of totally dorked out on the hero's journey and all of that. And I wanted to bring all of that, or as much of that as possible, into my work at Muddy Shoe Adventures. And so we started crafting all of these programs that were based around these theories and this model.
Gotcha. Yeah, and when you were at Muddy Shoe is when you and I got connected.
Yeah.
And I was working for a different travel company at the time. Yeah, and it's cool to see what this has turned into.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So at what point did Jake come into the picture then? And did you guys found Explorex?
Yeah. So we met at the Adventure Travel World Summit in Ireland in 2014. So the Adventure Travel Trade Association, which Explorex is a member of, they hold an annual conference in that year. 2014 was in Ireland. I had met Jake's business partner at the time, this guy Dan Moore, who lives here in Seattle, and he's a good buddy. Amanda, that's who I ran into this morning when I was on the phone with you. And Dan and I became fast friends, but I never met Jake. And so, but prior to going to that conference, Don Mankin, who we'll talk to next week, our other friend Kurt Katai, Jake and I, so the five of us had rented this mansion / like manor house, like whatever you want to call it, outside the conference center in Ireland. And that's when Jake and I first met. And I'll never forget, like meeting him or seeing him for the first time, because Dan's like, oh, there's Jake. It was in the Shannon airport. And I looked over and I mean, there's, 100 people there. And I was like, I knew immediately, like, that's Jake. That's gotta be him. He's got this glow, this energy, this like something about him, like that's gotta be Jake. And sure enough, it was. And we just sat around, I mean, the entire conference, just, drinking a pint of Guinness and just talking about this idea that travel is not only an amazing opportunity to have fun and explore and meet new people and all of these other great, take photos, eat great food, all this stuff, but it's also one of the most unique and powerful opportunities to learn and grow and shift perspectives. And how do we do more of that? How do we bring that approach and that how do we support travelers in reimagining what travel is all about? So it's not just all, take, but it's like, how do I bring my best self to this? How do I give to the destinations I'm going to? Not in terms of like bringing gifts per se, but really contribute, right? To a conversation. How do we share culture, while we're there? And how do I then take what I learned and come back to my community and really, use that experience to grow and make an impact. So we met in 2014, and then over the next 2 years, really just bonded and talked, almost on a daily basis, to the point where in 2016, we spoke at the Adventure Travel World Summit, but this time it was in Anchorage, Alaska. And that's when we launched the Transformational Travel Council and really sort of formalized what we were doing. And then as a result, and so the feedback and the response to that was so tremendous that, well, that TTC, the Transformational Travel Council, was designed to be a consulting for a consulting company and a membership organization, not dissimilar to ATTA. Jake and I really wanted to continue to put these ideas and these thoughts and this model into practice. And so I had sort of retired Muddy Shoe at that time for financial reasons. Jake was doing Evergreen Escapes at the time, but also sort of mentally or, spiritually struggling because he knew he wanted to do more and bigger things and not, air quote, just day trips in and around the Seattle area. And so we decided let's take these two entities, let's merge the best parts of them together and launch our own company geared or founded on these principles of learning and growth and exploration and discovery. And so that's when we launched Explorex in late 2017.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the TTC just to give people an idea of what that is and what it looks like and how it relates to?
Yeah, I mean, TTC is amazing. And I would say, it's gone through a series of iterations and change courses, especially now with what's going on with COVID and the industry being sort of turned on its head in many ways. I would describe it as a membership organization, first and foremost. There's over 100 different member companies, including Explorex, that are part of TTC. Jake is really running and managing that with the help of a lot of other people right now. So we sort of divide our time. I do mostly Explorex, support and guide and provide advice for TTC. Jake mostly manages TTC and offers support, guidance, and advice for X. And it works out really well, but it's largely a membership organization right now. There are some great tools and resources. Like there's a travel designer program, which is training people that are either in the industry but haven't been doing, this sort of level of work, this deep, meaningful, life-changing transformational travel work, and giving them tools and resources to begin to do that more, but also to share resources with amongst other companies that are currently doing this and, bringing best practices to the table. And also, I mean, at some point we're launching a traveler focused, a consumer focused arm, right? Which is sort of down the road right now. It's still a very, very young entity and we're getting started there, but so it's great. It's great. I love it. Super proud of what we've built there, what Jake has built there, and I'm proud to be a member.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious to hear you talk about what forms like transformational travel can take on. I know that we've had many discussions about how the word transformation, like it carries a lot of weight, but can you talk about what transformation kind of can look like and what it means to you?
Yeah, and it's a bit of a loaded question, right? Because I think one of the ongoing conversations that we have at TTC is, what does transformation mean? What does it look like? And there may not be a right answer or a wrong answer. And initially, the idea of transformational travel, how we defined it at the forefront of this was any travel experience that inspires someone to make positive changes in their lives, right? So therefore, not needing to have to travel with Explorex or any other TTC member, right? You can very much go on your own. And if you happen to have insights and perspective shifts and you were inspired to take action as a result, then I would define that as a transformational experience. But we've also brought in this element of process as well. So it's not just the outcome part, but it's also the process part. And it's how do you approach that experience? Or what are some of the things that you can do to enhance or increase the likelihood of of having this life-changing experience? And a lot of this kind of goes back to my research, and the outcomes of that, the idea that, setting an intention and challenging yourself along the way and disconnecting, from technology, but also physically disconnecting and all these things, right? Were such critical parts of this process of learning and growth through travel that sort of became the process part also was critical to reaching the desired outcome. And yet personally, I can only speak for myself. My definition and perspectives of this have evolved over time as well, right? Like it was very formulaic before, right? It was Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and it's these steps and these 9 things, and it's this acronym and that acronym and everything else. And what I've realized, reflecting on my own experiences, but also honestly talking to a lot of our travelers, right, over the past 2.5 years, it's that it's not about setting intentions per se, right? It's not about doing all of the right things along the way, right? It's really about your mindset when you go into it. It's about being curious. It's about being open-minded, right? It's about being open-hearted. It's about engaging, deeper and more meaningfully than you ever have, right? And challenging yourself in a very fun and invigorating way to say, cool, I'm going to do these things today. And we, one of the things that we do is provide a list of challenges, if you will, to our travelers to say, all right, here's some things that you can do to sort of push your own comfort zones a little bit, that will support you in this journey. And so if you can be curious, if you can be open-hearted and open-minded, if you can engage at a deeper and more meaningful level, and if you can take time to reflect at the end of this trip, right? When you're done and step back. I mean, I was reading you guys before we got on this quote from Pico Iyer, right, who I love, and it's about the fact that it's only after the trip, right? When you think about the sights you've seen and the things you've done, can you really begin to develop the insights, right, and the learnings and the things that are going to inspire you moving forward and the actions that you want to take moving forward. So, so for me and for us, and what we're doing is really about inviting and encouraging and empowering travelers to go. And yeah, it's great to set an intention. Yeah, it's great to understand what's calling you to this adventure and maybe what you want to get out of it. But we also say, let that go. Identify it, cool, and let it go. And then just engage and have fun. Be curious, be open, right? And take time to reflect afterwards. And if you can do that, the other thing that's been coming up a lot for me lately is the idea of simplicity. And it's that, when you approach an experience, and if the expectation is transformation, it can be dangerous, right? Because one of a couple things will happen, right? One, it will sort of scare a lot of people away, right? When you talk about transformational travel, it's one of those, like, we've talked about this, it's sort of like our Project X trips, right? Yeah. It's really interesting and really intriguing. And yes, Project X is all about going into the unknown and letting you and Amanda and I plan a trip, and people don't know where they're going. And we tell you the night before you leave, and then off you go. And it's super invigorating and exciting. And yet not that many people actually book it, right? And sort of like transformational travel, people are drawn to the idea of it, right? But at the end of the day, what we've found over and over and over again, what I've heard over and over and over again is, I'm not ready to turn my life upside down. I'm not ready to move to the Andes and start raising alpacas, or move to Nepal and become a Buddhist monk and start a nonprofit, right? Like, I just want to make subtle, small shifts in my life that will have a lasting impact, right? And so much of what we're doing now, right, and my belief now is that it's about those simple, small, subtle changes that we can make, and that will ultimately have really big impacts, not only on our lives, but those around us.
Yeah. And what's cool is that, like, we'll see some people who come in with like an idea of how they think this is all going to turn out. And then they come home and they're like inspired by something that just hit them out of left field. Like, totally. Like the example that comes to mind is when you said Project X, it's like we had a honeymoon couple go to Mongolia, and they came back and decided just after seeing how the nomadic people lived, they just came back and simplified their life. We did, and they were your clients, but they ended up like selling a lot of their things and.
Yeah. I mean, it was, so they came back and, we got into this post-trip conversation, and what struck you, what did you learn, et cetera. And they were like, we were dumbfounded by how simple these people live, right? These nomadic people in Western Mongolia, like, they carry everything on horseback, right? Like, all their everything, and they've got to be able to transport it. And here we are, living in this beautiful apartment in Lyon, but like, we don't need all this stuff. What do we need? And so we got into this really deep conversation about that, and they did, about a month later, end up downsizing and moving into a smaller apartment, and really just selling and simplifying. But it also sort of led into this, one of my favorite conversations ever, which was about where do we do that in our own lives, right? Where do we carry all this excess baggage and all this crap, that we have accumulated over the years, right? Limiting beliefs and fears and blah, 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 right? That we, if we can just find a way to let go of them, right? How free that will make us feel. And so that was almost as important or more important than the whole downsizing, and that, anyway, so we still stay in touch and they're great, but yeah,
I know. And there's just there's so many unique examples like that it just
absolutely,
it keeps us inspired
totally.
as well. It's pretty fun. So I know you and Jake got tattoos of the Explorex logo, right?
We are committed to the cause.
So isn't there a story behind that?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a story behind everything, right? We were in Greenland, so this is February of 2018, for TTC, and the local tourism board in Nuuk, Colorful Nuuk, hired us to come in and do a 3-day workshop on concepts of transformational travel and to begin a conversation with them about how they can, begin to integrate some of those concepts into their own destination in terms of marketing, but also in terms of product and services and how their operators are working with and with clients and all that. And quick story, but Jake and I flew in, we were in Reykjavik the night before we flew to Greenland, and it was February, right? So we're in the North Atlantic in the middle of February, right? So it's not particularly warm. And the flight was delayed almost 4 hours, and eventually we took off at close to midnight in a prop plane in the middle of a blizzard. I'll never forget looking at the window, and the snow was just blowing as hard as can be sideways. And we're taking off in a prop plane over the North Atlantic into this blizzard.
Man.
So I'm got a pretty strong stomach and pretty okay on a flight, and I think Jake and I held hands half the time, right? And man, if we die, we're dying for the cause, because the plane was just shaking so crazy. And anyway, we ended up getting there safely.
One of the many bonding moments you two share.
Oh, there's a whole nother webinar to talk about those things. But we were actually having a break one day, and we were in a local restaurant in Nuuk, and there was this woman, and she had her arm saran wrapped, and so that's, if anyone who's gotten tattoos, you sort of know that a lot of times afterwards they put some saran wrap on there to keep the safe and clean and all that stuff. But there's also Neosporin type stuff that they put on there to kind of let it heal a little bit. And so I went up and said, hey, because I'm very shy. And I went up to her and I was like, hey, what'd you get as a tattoo? And, it turns out that I'll never forget this, her 28-year-old daughter was just diagnosed with terminal brain cancer.
Oof.
So she got the word believe, with the cancer ribbon as the L on her arm. And it was really beautifully done. And we chatted for a good 20 minutes just about that whole thing, even though I didn't know her at all. But I said, well, where did you get it? And she said, right across the street, there's a visiting artist. And it's a guy from Copenhagen. So go back to my grad school.
Oh, yeah.
And he was and I had actually heard of him before. He's one of the most well-known tattoo artists from Copenhagen. And he happened to be visiting Greenland, because Greenland's a territory of Denmark, right? So cool. So he was there for a month as a visiting artist. So right after lunch, Jake and I walked over just to kind of pop in and see what was going on. And he's like, yeah, I can do you guys tonight at 5 o'clock if you want. So we're just oh shit, what do we do? And so we're all right, let's do it. And we had no idea what we were going to get. And we had just had our logo designed by our good friends. And
wow.
And we're Micaiah and his team, and they did a great job. And we're oh, let's just get our logo tattoo, because it's kind of fun anyway. And so we both got our original Explorex logo tattooed on our arms.
Nice. And Jake has it in the same spot, doesn't he?
Same spot, yeah. Same
yeah.
spot, yeah. So anyway,
that's awesome.
More stories.
Well, luckily we haven't changed our logo since then. Well, I guess
a little bit.
Yeah.
This is the OG logo, right, or whatever. Right.
Well, what do you think about travel these days, and what it's going to look like in kind of a post-COVID world? And where do you see the industry going?
Yeah, Well, it's a question everyone's asking these days, right? And
Yeah, I thought I would address the elephant in the room.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I heard somebody say the other day that, anyone who says they know what's going on is either stupid or lying,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's sort of apropos here. It's so everything is evolving, right? And I think, as a company, the best we can do is, as we talked about the other day, just sort of stay water, right? Stay fluid, be responsive, be communicative, talk to our travelers, talk to our partners, talk to the tourism boards, and see. And there's, frankly, a lot of negativity out there, with what's going on here in the States in terms of COVID and the ability of the U.S. traveler to get out and explore the world in the next 6 months or more, and how reliant the entire global travel industry is on the U.S. market, is becoming more and more clear. When I talk to our partners today in Denmark and Ireland and yesterday in Chile, right, and in Iceland, and everyone's just like, man, like we're hurting right now. But what's also great is that we're having really creative conversations as well, and we're trying to develop new products, new services, new ways of looking at things, new ways to support travelers. Am I frozen right now?
So stay tuned for the registration email for that one. It'll be fun.
And I think I'm back.
It looks like we have Michael back. You must have clicked something and it froze the whole thing.
No, I think the Wi-Fi is just,
Yeah.
it's a whole other story.
But you were about to show us the tattoo. I was interrupting you because
Oh.
somebody asked to see it.
Oh, okay. So
There you go.
Yeah. Just to quickly finish my ramble, but I remain cautiously optimistic, about the travel industry. I think that I'm seeing a lot of resilience. I'm seeing a lot of creativity, collaboration. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think there's going to be companies that don't survive, frankly, but I know we're doing the best we can to make sure that we're, staying water, staying creative, staying collaborative, doing what we can, communicating with our partners, communicating with our travelers, and we're just going to have to. I mean, I sound like a professional athlete being interviewed. We're going to take it one day at a time. It's a team effort, but it is. It really is. It truly is. And hope that we're all able to pull through this, and also trust that for whatever reason this may be, as terrible as everything is, that there's going to be a real silver lining to all of this, and at a variety of levels out, within, and also, and most importantly, outside of the travel space, that this is going to end up being, a unifying experience for humanity, and that we can all move powerfully forward together.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing that, and just like reconnecting with so many folks around the world right now, and taking the time to get creative and adapt, and
Totally.
But we also have a little bit more time to read. I want to hear about. So Michael is a bookworm. He's ordering books, probably one new book every week.
At least.
Like I would bet money that once a week that he's gonna be, you guys, I have this new book that I just got. I'm just so excited about it.
True.
So can you tell us a few of your favorites? Try and limit that, and maybe what you're reading right now that's really inspiring to you.
Yeah. I think my all-time favorite is probably The Alchemist. I've read that, I don't know, a dozen times. I've got it in a couple different languages. I've got a couple different iterations of the book.
What about that one resonates with you so deeply?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a variety of things. One, I feel like every time I read it, there's something else that I get out of it. The first time I read it, it was it was about love, right? And I was going through something at that time in 2008 that the lessons about love and all of those things were what really struck me. The next time I read it, much more about career. The next time I read it, much more about, so like every time I feel like there's something else that I'm getting out of it. And it's also very much, to tie it back to the hero's journey, it's very much about that. It's about the shepherd in Spain, and he has this dream, and literally this, like a dream of where, what he wants to do in his life and traveling, but also literally a dream of, like, he has a dream that he's at the pyramids in Egypt. And it's all about his journey to get there. And, the crossing the threshold and the trials and the challenges and all of that, and the inspiration and wisdom that came from that entire thing to kind of, so it sort of very much mirrors the hero's journey. So that's probably my favorite. If I ever come across that in the bookstore, I'll buy it for people. The 10th anniversary edition is my favorite. I know that sounds super wild and weird to say, but it's my favorite because the introduction to that is different than the others, the 25th and other editions. And that is one of my favorite parts of the book. So that's one. There's so many others. I mentioned before this, I'm reading The Art of Stillness by Pico Iyer. Great stuff, short, like 60 pages or something like that. Very, very powerful read. I'm also reading a book called This Book Will Make You Dangerous, which is really about stepping into your power and your courage and not letting the things that typical society would, the expectations and obligations that typical society would, and stresses and pressures would put on you, and really saying, hey, you know what, like, if I'm going to live and be authentic and true to myself, I have to pursue my passions and go after this and live in a powerful way. So that's by a guy named Trip Lanier. It's got some colorful language. It's meant for men. So if you're opposed to language and that kind of thing, it's probably not for you, but I'm getting a lot of value out of that. Our buddy Phil Cousineau, who's one of our mentors, he actually was a protege of Joseph Campbell. He's written a series of books, but the one that we use often in our travel design is The Art of Pilgrimage, and the concepts that came with that. So Phil is a real inspiration in terms of the book, but also the conversations that we have with him pretty regularly. So it's just a couple of them.
Yeah, that's great.
Lots more.
Yeah, you have like a whole library there.
You can see some of it over here, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
That's awesome. I think, people are, so we're coming up on an hour now, and just for the sake of everyone's time here, I think we should kind of move it along. So
can I just also comment that I saw we had a comment from Jean Campbell.
Oh, yeah.
Joseph's wife, who I'm assuming is passed at this point, although I should know this, her name was Jean Campbell. So just a cool, I'm assuming that wasn't her, but anyway.
Cool. Somebody's asking if you're a Bruce Chatwin fan.
Oh, no. I mean, not that I'm not. I'm not sure that I've ever read or heard of. So I feel exposed and ignorant right now. But no. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I know Amanda has some rapid fire questions for you to wrap things up. So
awesome.
I do. These questions are to be answered in a word or short phrase. So you'll have to
how difficult it is for me, right?
Keep your answers short
okay.
and sweet.
All right.
And one, not multiple. The first few are travel related.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you never been, but most looking forward to exploring?
Patagonia.
Excellent. And if you could go back to one place right now, where would it be?
Faroe Islands.
Faroe Islands, excellent. Both small group journeys coming up.
Unintentional.
Not that I'm putting a plug in there. What is one thing you never travel without?
Oh, journal.
Very good. Do you have a life motto or philosophy that can be summed up in a couple words?
Oh, geez.
Or that is most in your spot right now?
Yeah, it's the one that I keep going back to is follow your bliss. I know it's sort of cliche, and it's Campbell's sort of thing, and anyway, it's just that if you
Perfect. Short phrase answer.
I know.
Good job.
Follow your bliss. There you go.
Excellent. Last one. Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Oh, yeah, Ghost Adventures. I love watching Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. It's amazing.
Excellent.
That's
Perfect.
awesome. Yeah, Ghost Adventures, like they freak me out, but they're pretty intriguing too. I like that. Awesome. So that about wraps it up. So before you guys go, so again, next week we have our friend Don Mankin, who's going to be on at 5 p.m. Pacific time next Wednesday. So tune in for that one.
Can I just
yeah,
super
go
quick,
for
like,
it.
so like the inspiration behind that, as I sort of mentioned before, was like Don and I would get together once or twice a week. I'd ride my bike over to his house because it was about a mile away, and we would just sit on his porch drinking IPAs and just chatting about travel. And he has stories for years. And so, you know, when we were chatting a few weeks ago, I said, well, let's just do this. Let's take it to the world, and let's have this conversation about all of the incredible stories you have. So that's going to be a very, very insightful and funny and fun webinar.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll
Yeah.
be really fun. So if you guys have questions for Michael specifically, you can email him at michael@explorer-x.com. General inquiries, you can email travel@explorer-x.com. You can see our website at explorer-x.com, and then follow us on social media at GoExploreX. So that's it from me. I hope to see you guys next week. So thank you so much, Michael.
You did a
It's
good
pleasure.
job staying right at 6.
I know.
Yeah,
You
look
guys
at
did a very
that.
good job of keeping me under control. Thank you so much.
That was
All right.
wonderful, though. Thank you. That was
Yeah,
great.
thanks everybody. Have a great week.
All right. Thanks.